Hey guys, today we start talking satire in our formal satire unit. So we're going to start just going over some terminology with devices of satire. So first, what it is the use of humor, irony, exaggeration, or ridicule to expose and criticize people's stupidity or vices, particularly in the context of contemporary politics and other topical issues. Yeah, generally satire is pretty topical. It's about what's going on in the world around you right then, because that's the point. It's used in the hopes that people will see the error of their ways and make positive changes. There isn't really much point in making a satire of something that happened 300 years ago because it ain't going to change. It's old. So usually it's contemporary. It's looking at what's happening around you in politics or pop culture or the media, and then making some sort of statement about it in the hopes that it'll move into the direction you want. Usually it's funny. We often think of satirical stuff as being a joke, but it doesn't have to be. 1984 is a piece of satire because it challenges, the direction the world could have headed in 1948. It serves as that warning so that people will change their ways. So it is a piece of satire. It's just not funny. In terms of modern day, where you're going to find satire, most comedians will have some sort of topical stuff. Anyone who's riffing on politics, they're using pieces of satire. Saturday Night Live is a huge source of satire. They cover all the different bases, all the different types. Last Week Tonight with John Oliver, another good source. Daily Show. Online, if you look at The Onion, it's just where you're going to go and find people with their humorous takes on whatever's happening in the world. Most major newspapers also have some sort of writer or cartoonist who is there for political satire, making their political cartoons or commentary in the hopes that people will change the way they think about things. So anyway, that is satire. Further terminology, mockery, the subject of laughter, scorn, or ridicule, the target of the satire. So the mockery is who or what we are making fun of. If you're not sure who's the mockery of this thing, by the end, take a moment and reflect. If you can figure out who comes off looking like a jackass, that's generally going to be the mockery. For Partner's Tale, for example, we had these three drunks. They vow to kill death, and then they ultimately die. It's a satire on that sort of sinful, hedonistic lifestyle where all you're going to do is party and drink and gamble and screw around. And ultimately, it got them killed. So a little satire on that sort of a sinful lifestyle. In terms of parody, that is a mocking imitation of a known person, literary work, or event. Again, anytime you've got a caricature of a public figure, that's going to be a parody. So Saturday Night Live, again, does that well. You got Alec Baldwin as Trump, Kate McKinnon as Ruth Bader Ginsburg. These are all parodies of real public figures. And you can also have parodies of movies, TV shows, whatever. So long as it's something that's in that public consciousness where people are going to get the reference, you can make a parody of it, and it can be effective. You've had whole movie franchises, the Scary Movie franchise, for example, just mocking as a parody. They work as a parody to mock horror movies, for example. So parody, mocking imitation of a known person, literary work, or event. The mock heroic is the imitation of the literary epic and its style by exaggeration and distortion, and by elevating the trivial to a level higher than it deserves. So mock heroic, right? You take something that is just sort of mundane, everyday kind of basic stuff, and then you elevate it to this sort of heroic level of significance and importance. If you guys are familiar with the Harold and Kumar movies, this would be a good example of mock heroic. For those of you unfamiliar, Harold and Kumar are two guys. They just get really high, and then they want to eat burgers. Like, that's the whole conflict of the movie. They want to get burgers. But the way it's presented is in a mock heroic, because it's not just get hungry, leave the house, get burgers, return, but it's this epic journey with all these twists and turns along the way. They want White Castle specifically. They go to White Castle, and that location was closed down. And they try to go to another one, and they get lost, and they end up at this party, and then their car gets stolen, and then they ride a cheetah, and then they're hang gliding, and then they're in a street fight. And it's all this different stuff along the way as they're on this quest for burgers. So mock heroic, again, takes that something that's pretty basic, pretty mundane, let's get burgers, and you elevate it into this sort of heroic journey to get what you want. So that's mock heroic. Take something fairly basic and blow it up and exaggerate it to something far more than it needs to be. And then we've got verbal irony, which is just saying one thing and meaning another, right? In general conversation, we talk about sarcasm like, oh, I didn't mean that. I was just being sarcastic. What you mean is you were using verbal irony, saying one thing and meaning another. Sarcasm, technically, in the context of our satire unit, simply means using praise to personally mock someone. It's a fun fact, comes from a Greek word meaning to tear flesh. So basically, you're praising someone, but you're really cutting them down. For example, your friend walks in with a haircut and you're like, oh, wow, I really like your new haircut. Totally distracts from your messed up nose. It's like, wow. Well, on the one hand, there's praise. I like your haircut. But it's really just mocking someone for having a jacked up nose. So sarcasm, using praise to insult somebody, right? So there you go. It's kind of cruel, but when done right and with a willing target or a target you don't really mind mocking, can be pretty solid as a tool for satire. And in common practice, we do use sarcasm interchangeably with verbal irony. In the context of the class, sarcasm is specifically using praise to insult someone. Then we got understatement, implying the opposite by saying less than what you mean to say. Let's see, understatement. You go to a concert and, well, someday you go to a concert and it's the greatest show ever and it's blown your mind. You just can't stop thinking about it. And then your friend who really wanted to go but couldn't ask you about it, and you're like, oh, yeah, it was okay. I mean, it was good, but you didn't miss much. And that's understatement, right? You believe it was the greatest thing ever, but you downplay it. You understate it. Nah, it was pretty good. It was okay. Just because you don't want to hurt their feelings. You don't want them to feel like they missed out on the greatest thing ever, even though they did. So that is understatement, saying less than what you mean to say. Then you've got overstatement, exaggerating by saying more than what you mean to say. So there's the expression, I'm so hungry I can eat a horse. Well, that's overstatement. I mean, literally, you cannot consume an entire horse. That's just physically impossible. The stomach doesn't stretch like that. So that'd be overstatement, saying more than what you mean to say. So hungry I can eat a horse. No, you couldn't. You're just really hungry. All right. And then lastly, we've got bathos, which is going quickly from the sublime or serious to the ridiculous or to over sentimentalize. So you take something really serious and then like that, you switch over to something ridiculous. And that jarring contrast is bathos. There's an old movie called Old School, starring Will Ferrell. It is a comedy. Over the course of this movie, we get to meet this old guy named Blue. He's like 90-something, and he's hilarious, and he's fantastic, and everyone loves Blue. And then, spoiler, halfway through the movie, Blue dies. And it's heartbreaking, it's sad. They cut from this sudden, unexpected, tragic death to Blue's funeral. And it's a funeral, so everyone's sad, whispered tones, somber. At which point, Will Ferrell, being a comedian, stands up and starts singing, and it's loud and off-key and hilarious. And that would be an example of bathos, going from something that's really serious and somber, a funeral, to just a ridiculously hilarious rendition of an old song. So that'd be one example of bathos, going from something that's really serious to something really ridiculous like that. Another example of bathos would be to over-sentimentalize something. So you take something that really isn't that big a deal, but you pour all this emotion into it, and then, yeah, it sounds ridiculous. If the example, don't cry over spilled milk, right? You spill milk, and if suddenly you just break into tears, like, what if the cow that sacrificed, and I've dishonored the cow because the milk is all spilled. Like, that's ridiculous. There's no need to cry over spilled milk. That's why you have the saying. But to over-sentimentalize that, to add all sorts of emotion in a situation that doesn't really call for it, that would be an example of bathos. So these are the satirical terms, or the terms of satire, rather, that we're going to be using for this unit. So as you're doing your analysis, refer back to these things, use this terminology as you're doing your academic analysis of ridiculous articles from The Onion or clips from SNL, because this is where we are headed for the next couple weeks. All right. Hope this helped. Take care. Later, guys.